Hello there. Today we are interviewing another Santa Fe Film Festival filmmaker, Keith Copsin, who has a film in the festival called Seven Arrows Juvy Cowboys. And we're going to learn a little bit more about the film and the filmmaker. So, welcome today, Keith. Thanks for joining me.
Well, thanks for inviting me, Stephanie. It's an honor to be a part of the Santa Fe Film Festival. I'm a local New Mexican, so this is kind of our Oscars.
Yes, it is. We are excited to highlight New Mexican filmmakers,
Yeah.
and especially those in the festival. So that's really great. So tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, right now I'm a bailiff in children's court and I work with the Juvenile Detention Center. So the coincidences of me writing screenplays that deal with troubled youth, and I actually work with troubled youth. So I work with troubled youth now, but my background is I'm from New Mexico, from the South Valley. Left the South Valley to go to UCLA Film School, the extension program.
Right.
Left out there with just my car and a duffel bag. Went to UCLA Film School, had to drop out because my car broke down and I couldn't go to class anymore.
Oh.
My screenwriting teacher, Glenn Bennist, said, "Why aren't you in class?" And I said, "Well, I don't have a car and I can't get over there and I'm not working, so I don't have any money." So he introduced me to a producer at the time at Culver City Studios named Stuart Lyons. He is an executive producer of Breaking Bad, and I became Stuart Lyons' production assistant for about 5 years.
Wow.
Warner Brothers bought out the TV show Step by Step and Getting By from Culver City Studios. We all moved to the Warner Brother lot in Burbank, and I ended up working in the mailroom, driving, bringing mail back and forth for our TV shows, and that's where my inspiration to want to make movies really kicked in.
Wow, that is amazing. I used to live down the street from Culver City Studios before
Wow.
I moved to New Mexico.
Oh, wow. So we got a reverse thing going.
Right. Yeah. So that is so amazing. And it's important for other filmmakers or other, people coming up that want to be in this business is ask, right? Don't be afraid.
Don't be afraid to ask. People tend to help people when they feel like they're being genuine with them, and
Right.
never be embarrassed about your past, where you're at. I didn't have a job at the time. I was living in some little studio in somebody's backyard. And I moved out there just to try to see what the big city was about, being born and raised in New Mexico.
Right.
So I was scared. I never moved anywhere in my whole life. And my first place I landed in California was Burbank. So you have to be real. And when you're real, people tend to help you.
Right. No, that's so important. And that comes through with some of the clips that I've seen of your work. You
Yes.
have a passion for storytelling, and they're not the easy stories. They're the
No.
stories that are the honest truth about who we are. And, at least that's how it made me feel,
Yes.
watching them, because they were so powerful and they just captivating because you wanted to know more, because you wanted to know the story. So
Yes.
tell us about your film in the festival, because I'm so excited
Oh,
that,
yeah.
Seven Arrows, Juvy Cowboys. Tell us all
Well,
about it.
I wrote the screenplay inspired by Stuart Lyons. He told me, many years ago, I'm dyslexic, so I have a hard time, and I had learning disabilities, but I didn't want to have that as a crutch to achieve my dream. So I forced myself to learn how to use a Final Draft. So I ended up writing the screenplay. So Seven Arrows has been under my arm for about 25 years because I did this. This is based on a real story. It's inspired by a real job I had when I worked with troubled youth and showed up and ended up taking this covered modern day wagon train journey all the way to South Dakota. I kept a diary while I was on this wagon train, living in teepees. It was like a boot camp. And I had my own group of kids, 7 boys from all over the country, Black kids, white kids, Hispanic kids, Native American kids, 13 to 17 years old. And I was kind of forced. I was not much older than these kids. So I was more like an older brother, but I did a journal. And I wrote a journal about my adventures across the North American wilderness on this wagon train. And that was the inspiration for me to go to UCLA, try to figure out how can I make this idea into a movie. Went to UCLA, got the job with Stuart Lyons. I've had the script underneath my arm this whole time, and I've never given up the dream. And I know I'm 53 years old, but I feel like I'm seasoned now. I'm ready to go. I'm passionate. And what I want to do with this screenplay is I want to use it as a foundation to make the feature film, or to take the script and divide it into 10 episodes on a Netflix series. I wrote a secondary screenplay called Juvy Cowgirls, because the story's about an all-boy cast, with all male cast, taking this crazy action adventure journey to Canada, which is the ultimate goal. And once they make it to Canada, they're all shipped back in buses. But somebody's got to bring those covered wagons, those horses, and those Native American teepees back to New Mexico. So a prison bus for juvenile girls drops off 30 girls in Canada. Now their stories, an all-female cast, all female girls 13 to 17, all female boot camp counselors and wagon train leaders, and their journey bringing the wagon train all the way back to New Mexico in an 11-month journey. This journey takes 11 months. We travel through the winter, spring, summer, fall, wild bears, wolf packs, the snow, winter, summer, living in Native American teepees is huge. And there's 8 covered wagons, 8 teepees, and it's a huge production. So I have a sequel where the girls are just as tough as the boys, especially from the Juvenile Detention Center, because I worked there, so I know how tough the girls are. My sequel script is bringing the wagon train home, and that's the girls' film. But I've never given up the dream. So by day, I'm the bailiff, but at night, I'm trying to push my project 7 Arrows and get that started, because it's my baby. It's inspired by a true story.
Right. And so you have music in this that you're incorporating, correct?
The youth, is that what you said?
No, music. Sorry, music.
Yes, I want to be that New Mexico filmmaker that produces everything in-house. So I'm very music oriented. So what I want to do is produce not only the scores to the movie, but musical soundtracks that relate to the kids, that make this movie, put it in context for young kids. Young boys all over the country are going to want to go see 7 Arrows, because they're going to want to be those boys on that cool wagon train journey. Right. All these young girls are going to want to see the movie because they want to see all these boys on this wagon train journey. So the sequel, when the girls are bringing the wagon train back, it's going to be the reverse. So the goal is to in-house produce the score, the soundtracks, the commercial tracks, cast it in New Mexico using New Mexico filmmakers. This is that dream film project for New Mexico. It's high concept. It's not a buddy story. This is a modern day Western. So it's a big project. So I'm really hoping to get people out there who are going to go to the Santa Fe Film Festival to see this project that I created, the little short film, which is basically us just going to the mountains and trying to get some photos and shooting some stuff. We ended up getting like 14 minutes worth of footage. And I said, well, why don't we just put it together and call it a short film and enter it into film festivals? But really, the short film in the festival is really just promotional content for visuals, to give people a taste of what could be the big budget feature film.
Right. So you also, from what I saw, you had some local artists doing music.
Yes. Correct? Yes. That's the goal. And I knew that was the goal from the get-go. My goal was never to look outside of the borders of New Mexico for talented artists when I know that they're here. Because when I worked at the Juvenile Detention Center and I'm in the jail cell with these kids in their cells, I've heard a lot of kids sing, rap, act, and I'm telling you right now, there's no need to go outside of the borders of New Mexico to look for TV stars. I want to cast all the juveniles that are going to be in the movie. I would like to put out a casting call that kids who have been in the Juvenile Detention Center, to put the real thing in there, because I want to cast real kids who are from the streets, who've been in the Juvenile Detention Center, because you can't fake that kind of stuff.
Right.
You need to make, if 7 Arrows is a boot camp story about rehabilitating kids, I'm not going to go get a bunch of actors to play kids from the streets or kids who've been in the D home. I want to get the real deal. This is not going to be a Disney movie. Right. This is going to be a real inspirational story with real drama, real dialogue, real backstories. made by New Mexicans from troubled youth from New Mexico. And I even want to cast some of the youth officers in the Juvenile Detention Center because some of those guys can be movie stars. They know MMA. They look like movie stars. Why would I want to go get an actor to play a youth officer when I have potential movie stars working at the Juvenile Detention Center? So I want to keep it as real as possible, like Rocky did when I think was it a Rocky 2 or 3 when Apollo Creed started training Rocky, and he took him back to his old gym.
Right.
In that scene, all the fighters in that gym were real fighters. Because Sylvester Stallone and Apollo Creed, the actors, knew that they wanted to bring that realism, and you couldn't hire actors for that.
True. And that's what comes through from, some of the footage that I saw of yours, is that it is authentic. It does ring true because we're so used to seeing fiction and
Yeah.
and great stories, people come up with stuff. Okay, that's cool. But it's, and they take that from, maybe something they saw on a news, in the news or something, ripped from the headlines.
Yeah.
So, we're kind of conditioned to seeing those type of stories, but not really the authentic side of humanity, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
And the challenges that, they're troubled youth, but maybe it's out of their control because of, the circumstances of their family, and things that they have to face. And kids are not prepared for that. And it makes them so hardened, right?
Yes, yes.
And so whenever you work with them, you're trying to find that soft spot and help them break through from where they are, because that's also stopping them from growth.
Yes.
And
when I was a counselor, when I went on the real program, and what's in the screenplay is when I first started with these 4 boys, they're all straight from juvie. They're still hard. They just got on the wagon train a week. They just got out of the juvie. So they're still hard. And my goal was to soften them up. And we had to work through the racial tension because we had kids who were little skinheads. We had Chicano gangbangers. We had Crips and Bloods. So I had to get past their gang affiliation, past the racism, find out what the common denominator is to motivate my boys to work as a team, because I was more like a coach.
right.
I had to coach these boys like if they were a football team or a baseball team. And when you first start the season, everybody's on a different page. It's my job as a youth counselor to get them on the same page, especially if we're going to make it safely through the wilderness all the way to Canada. Because if my group of boys fall apart, then the whole program has to turn around and go back, and we don't get to finish the journey. So as a counselor, and in the story, in my screenplay, my character finds out what these kids are good at. One kid's a great artist. One kid is great at his poor mother. One of the kids in my story was so poor, they had holes in his walls in his bedroom that he shared with his brothers and sisters. In order to cover up the holes, the mother would tape the stock market over the holes in the room. So the kid growing up, year after year, waking up, seeing these things in his head, didn't realize that he picked up the information. So when we're on the wagon train and he's talking about the stock market, I'm like, dude, you need to go for that. And he's like, well, I'm just this gangbanger from, I'm like, I don't care what you are, right? Another kid was great at drawing. He's an architecture. I would see him drawing in this dirt on the wagon train, houses and futuristic houses. Like, dude, you need to go to school for that. Right. So like you said, there are diamonds in the rough that these kids are natural stars. It's not because they don't have the skills. They just don't have the opportunities. And what 7 Arrows of the story is starting it's the Bad News Bears story. Mm-hmm. It's the Bad News Bears. The kids, my kids at the beginning of the script of the story fight constantly. They didn't respect me. It wasn't until I respected myself and said, you know what? I have to respect myself, and then that energy will go out that way. So my mom over the mail sent me a whistle, and I started using the whistle like a coach. And when they woke up the next morning at 4:30 in the morning, I'm blowing my whistle, and they're stumbling out of their teepee in the middle of the morning, half dressed, they could tell in my eyes that I was not going to be messed with anymore. And from that day forward, my boys started acting more like a team, and we started competing against the other teams who had already been there for a while, and they were well-oiled and experienced. We were the Bad News Bears of the whole wagon train. But as the story continues and we're getting close to the border of Canada, my character starts to motivate his boys, and they start working together to be the best team on the wagon train. And we, at the end, become the best team, and we get to lead the wagon train across the border of Canada, which is the ultimate prize, is to be the lead wagon that crosses the border of Canada. And we did it. And when we crossed the border of Canada, which is the end of the film, we jump off our covered wagons, off our horses, and we dogpiled on each other like we won the Little League World Series.
Right.
You know, we took an 11-month journey on a modern day wagon train that nobody else could say they've done.
Right.
We just experienced something that few people get to experience, and it changed my life. I changed theirs and they changed mine. We changed each other's. And then we hope that our experience when we go back, because these kids have to go back into the streets.
Right.
I've never contacted these kids afterwards. I'd be interested that one day when the movie gets made or the TV series, that these kids hunt me down and say, I was one of the kids that on your team. And that would be a great story. So
that would be.
This is one of those stories that needs to be made, not just because I wrote it and it happened to me, but who doesn't want to see an action adventure with 30 gangbanger kids, 12 to 17 years old, the Outsiders, right? Red Dawn, the Bad News Bears, Dances with Wolves, going across North America on a crazy adventure. And in that process, a story arc, we start off as enemies of the street and we end up bonding like brothers on the wagon train. So that's what Seven Arrows is all about.
That is, I mean, I'm getting chills here because I love that. I love that passion, and I love the need to tell this story because it's also about trust. I think
It's all about trust.
Right. We've lost trusting other people, right? And
role models, as a role model, as a male, a lot of these boys didn't have a male role model. Most of these kids are raised by their grandparents.
Right.
We don't give grandparents enough credit for raising these kids. And it wasn't until I got the whistle and changed my attitude, because before that, when they would mess up, I would make them get down and do 25 push-ups, but they wouldn't want to do it, and I couldn't make them do it.
Right.
So once I changed my attitude and had the whistle and acted as a coach, and when I said, give me 25, I got down on the floor with them and did the 25. So now they don't have any excuses because now we're a true team.
Right.
And if I'm willing to get down and do the push-ups and sit-ups, even though I didn't do it, then they don't have an excuse not to. Right. So that was a turning point in the screenplay.
Right. Well, that's such your experience is, you know, amazing, first of all, because not only did you come from, you know, the streets, if you will, as a youth, but then, you know, you're turning and using your talents and your compassion and your empathy to work with these youth, and then want to, you know, tell their stories in a way that gets people to look at differently at youth, right? And to reach out.
Exactly. You make a good point, because not only that, my idea and my wife, she's my executive producer on my partner. I have to mention my wife, Mona
That's
Copsin,
right.
and my grandbaby, Ava. But anyway, what we want to do is we want to start a separate program that's like a film school. So on the Seven Arrows film, we want to hire kids from the D Home or La Placita program to come in and work as production assistants, either following me around, the director around, the grip around, the actors around, and teach them a skill. So eventually these kids not only are going to be casted in the film, but also can work and get a paycheck, getting inspired by being part of the making of the film or the TV series too. So it's kind of like a smaller UCLA program here in New Mexico.
Right.
In my projects, I want to hire these troubled youth to learn a trade, to learn a skill, to inspire them, and then work them out self up. So when I move up as a producer, above the line producer, in all my projects that I make in the future, I have a group of kids that have worked with me from the get-go, who are learning a trade, who I want to take up with me.
Right.
Because when we all rise.
Right. No, that is awesome. I love that. And coming from LA, there was in fact, there's a bakery where, you know, they are all ex-cons. And so they come in, they learn a skill. And let me tell you, when you get their baked goods, I hate to say they're like the best baked goods I've ever purchased. And to drive to downtown, and driving to downtown LA, you know, so you're going out of your way because you know this is good. And I think that's what's going to happen here with what you're doing. people are going to see this. They're going to realize the value that you bring with wanting to not only make a film and tell stories, but also bring up those kids that need somebody to, help them and mentor them and get them
Yes.
to the next level, and have that opportunity like you had when you went to LA and didn't have a car. I mean, you have to, be seeking what your path is and staying on your path and wanting to continue.
Because it's not
And
going to come knocking on your door. What I want to tell these kids is nobody's going to come and save you.
right.
Nobody's going to come to your door and make your movie. Nobody's going to come here and make you go to school. Nobody's going to come to your door to do that. And that's the message in my screenplay. As a counselor, that's what I try to convey to my kids. Because we also had a teacher that went along on the wagon train with us that would teach these kids how to read and write, the
Oh,
basics.
sure,
Right?
right.
We didn't learn American history. Our teacher, who's like an Edward James Olmos character, would take these kids and an hour a day teach them how to write, teach them how to put together a sentence, fill out a job application,
Right.
things that these kids really need. They don't need to know about all this nonsense about whatever.
Right.
They need to know the basics and how to survive. And that's how we teach these kids. We don't fluff it up with a bunch of unnecessary topics. We teach them that nobody's going to come and save you. You've got to go out there and open the door yourself and make things happen and be yourself. And you will attract other people that are going to want to help you.
Right. No, those are all amazing points. And we're so excited to have this time with you this morning, but also to see what happens. So we're going to be following you, and we wish you the best in the Santa Fe Film Festival.
Yeah.
My name is Stephanie Pichet, and I'm the editor and publisher of RCR News Media.
Good job.
And thanks today for Keith joining us. And we will be tuning in and following Seven Arrows Juvy Cowboys at the Santa Fe Film Festival. Thank
Yes.
you.
Visionary sponsors looking for you guys.
Yes, and we're going to shout out to them and see if we can find some for you.
Thank you.